Uh, Welcome to the webinar. I'm Mark Riley, Principal Architect with Oxford Computer Group. Just put the screen up, prove that I am actually here. It's no recording. I'm gonna, as a bit of a distraction, and get started with the show here. So today we're going to talk Entra Verified IDs, really focused around the proofing, whether that be for partners, customers, or employees. And this just provides mechanisms for us to prove people. That's really the focus here. A number of things we can do with verified IDs, but this is really, as I say, kind of the focus of this one. So we'll start a little bit of overview of verified IDs, talking a bit more depth about some IT use cases, specifically the ones that most of the people we work with are driven through. Take a look at the process flow of these verified IDs, how we go about getting them. Had a couple short demos in here to see the process as it applies to Microsoft Entra Verified IDs. There's lots of verified ID things out there. These are not all of them. We won't see all the opportunities. And then take a moment to think about what are the next steps. This is really, as you know, new stuff. What do we want to do to get prepared? What are the things we need to look forward to in using verified IDs in our organization? And then I want to introduce you briefly to Credivera, a new partner to Oxford Computer Group that is really making some waves in the verified ID, verified credential space. So first of all, I think a lot of you already know a fair amount about OCG, Oxford Computer Group, but we have been around for quite a while. I worked with Oxford way back in the day before working for them as a partner of theirs, and then almost 10 years ago came back to Oxford to work with them as an architect. As you can see, lots of projects delivered, lots of high value things for Microsoft customers. We're very focused on the Microsoft stack. We work with the product team. That's how we know about these things coming up and can start to integrate them into customer systems. Planning assessments really become a big piece of our business. We've got some great people who go out and do security assessments that are really well received. Frank's done a great number of those. Readiness, security reviews, and of course we've been doing training for as long as OCG's been around. And deployment, we went all the way through Windows, MIM, ILM. We're now working with Savient, have been for 5 years, doing a lot of interesting work there. And recently moved more into managed services because people have been asking for those. We have help desk support, we have 24/7 monitoring, maintenance, patching, third-party management. We're also doing some managed platform services in the federal space, managing ISVs applications for those who can't in highly secure environments, GCC High, IL5, IL6, those kinds of things, operating those for customers who don't have cleared resources to do those. And so we're able to do that in federal space and government work as well. So talk about verified IDs, kind of an overview. What are they? I see them as descendants of this whole distributed identity, which you'll find DID, and in fact, we'll see DID littered throughout here. Descendants is probably not the right term, but it's kind of the way I view them. Verified IDs can work with blockchain and normally will in these. Well, one example that I created, the one demo I created, I'm simply using a web storage. I'm not using blockchain. Saves me on cost and everything for demos, so that's the only reason for that. But normally we do work with blockchain, that these verified IDs are put on the blockchain, so they're immutable, right? That's what we know about blockchains. I think of blockchains as kind of linked lists without a delete. So that means that once we put these verified IDs on a blockchain, they can't be altered. We can follow up by revoking them or making following changes on the chain to say that this ID is no longer valid. But that blockchain piece gives us the immutability of it, the fact that no one can go in and change that verified ID, swap the name out in it or some other property in the ID. It gives us that persistence and immutability. Some of the use cases, one of the big use cases you'll hear about verified IDs is for degrees or certifications. Microsoft, in building their Entra Verified ID solution, currently has a couple of samples in the portal. If you take a look at it, one is a generic sample, another one is an employee sample. They have two that are not built out yet, but that they indicate are coming, which is a university or I guess any student ID, and then also faculty verified ID. And I'm sure those samples will expand over time. We also can use them for any kind of award or certification. So if I take a training course and I want to prove that I've taken that training course, I can get a verified ID from that trainer that validates that I've completed that course. Of course, loyalty programs, your basic, Albertsons, QFC, Fry's, whatever, where you normally use your phone number, these loyalty programs could use verified IDs, which allow them to be presented in various formats. And we'll see that kind of as we go along. Really, proof of anything that you can think of can be wrapped up in a verified ID, and it just provides verification, right? I did, in the spirit of staying up to date. Let me find my video. What did I do in my video here? Better way for me to find it. Let's try this one. There we go. In the interest of keeping up to date, I went to GPT, excuse me, the current state, and asked about verified IDs. So we'll see how this goes in asking this. So this is an open AI. Microsoft just invested in it. Under the limitations, you notice sometimes may occasionally generate invalid information. So I asked ChatGPT, what are verified IDs? It comes back and tells me verified IDs are identification documents or credentials that have been checked and confirmed, right? Variety of purposes, might be government issued ID or whatever. That's not really where I'm going with that. So in common with ChatGPT, you have to be more specific. So this time I'm going to go back, as it says, it has limited knowledge of the world events after 2021. These were more known as verified credentials. So we'll go back and look at that. This is verified credentials, certifications that have been verified or trusted by a third party, education degrees, work experience, right? We're getting a lot closer, but it's not quite what I was looking for. So now get even more specific and ask it about digital verified ID or credentials, excuse me. And that gives me a little more of what I was looking for to define this. Electronic versions of documents have been verified by a third party, right? So things like diplomas, right? Diplomas managed on a blockchain, verification process ensures that the credentials authentic, has not been tampered with, providing a higher level of trust. That's exactly what we're talking about when we talk about verified IDs. So in most things we're doing with identification or authentication or authorization of any of those things that we deal with as an identity company, identity provider, trust is the center of this. So in this whole configuration, who trusts whom? And there really are three major players when we talk about verified IDs. There's a user, there's an issuer, and there's a verifier. And if we go back to a university scenario, which is an easy one for everybody to think about, the issuer would be the university, the user would be the student or graduate, and the verifier would be a potential employer. So the issuer trusts the user and grants the user this verified ID. Now there's some mechanism behind this trust. It isn't just an implicit trust that happens because they happen to be a student. The student has completed the course. The university has a record of that somewhere in their systems, whether or not, pass, fail, or whatever it is, we don't care. But the issuer knows that user and has trust in that user and hands them that verified ID. The user then trusts the employer that they're applying to, that employer needs to have that information. Now, the employer doesn't need to have information about the grade that was attained in this course. So the user has the opportunity whether or not they're going to present that information, all of the information that's in the verified ID, or just portions of that. So this is the end goal of it, that the user controls their identity and what pieces of that identity are granted access to other users. So I trust the verifier, I trust the employer that they're going to treat this information properly, so I share the verified ID with them. Well, the employer doesn't trust me yet, so the verifier or the employee, the potential employee, needs to verify that with the issuer. Now the verifier, the potential employer, has to have a trust with the issuer. This isn't something that just pops up again out of the blue. There must be some trust that is built ahead of time for this. So this is one of the things that we'll have to talk about, how we get verified IDs working. It requires that you have some level of trust with the people who issued the verified ID and the people who are offering that you're offering the verified ID to, right? So the potential employer, the verifier here, doesn't need to trust the user, because they're going to go out and verify with the issuer that yes, this user has this credential and that it hasn't expired if it's a type of credential that could expire, and that this user is valid for what they're calling for. So our use cases that I'm going to focus on today, these very broad use cases, but the ones that I find extremely interesting for our business and our customers and currently are pretty much these three. One is around identity proofing. So when we hire somebody, how do we know who they are? How do we know that they are the person that they say they are, and all those credentials that belong to them that we're able to see on University of Washington's website or whatever, that we know those match up back to the users if university isn't using verified IDs. Also for verification of employment. Now this may be for very different reasons. It might be because I'm doing business with a partner, and the partner wants to assure that anyone who accesses data is actually from OCG. And so I could present an OCG verified ID to that system to say that yes, I'm able to access this at this level because I am an OCG employee, which saves people having to do all the different little pieces of granting me information. Very similar to the way we do B2B, where we can grant a company the ability to manage their own users, but that takes it another step, that we say, well, anybody who's in OCG has access to this. And by having a verified ID from OCG, then I can access that information, and nobody needs to get in the middle of it. When my employment ends at OCG, then they can go ahead and invalidate that credential, and I will not be able to, even though I continue to hold it, and we'll see this, even though I continue to hold it, I won't be able to use it for anything because it'll be invalidated for me. And when that verifier goes to the issuer to say, does Mark really work for OCG? Then they'll say, nope, not anymore, and I'll be denied access. The third one really is kind of an institutional verification. So this might be something along the lines of a loyalty card, as I talked about, or maybe it's proof that I'm a member of a fitness center, or that I have a membership at a country club, or any of those kinds of things that have time frames on them and they can be renewed, and each of those things. So these are kind of the use cases we'll talk about here today. As I said, employee onboarding, when we look at hybrid scenarios, users are being employed in remote locations that may never have a face-to-face meeting prior to them beginning their employment, which is unusual. And we all know why that has come about, and it's simply become a part of things we do. So this ability allows us to do employee verification, particularly for onboarding or even post onboarding, as in fact in MFA. We're actually working with a customer to build a verified ID solution that will gate access to configuring MFA the first time. So there is this, it's not a race condition, but there is this contention between when I get my credentials in a classic sense of username, password, credentials, and when I register for MFA, that there is this, if someone steals my credentials, if it's sent out over email or something like that, which is very common, those potentially being picked up by someone who has a bad actor who has access to my new employee's personal email, then they could potentially register for MFA and get all of those things ahead of time. So this allows us to get in the middle of that and say, we want you to go out and get verified that you are who you say you are, and there are companies that do this, a number of them. And once you verify that you are who you say you are, then come back and we know that we'll allow you in to set up that MFA. And then moving forward, we won't use the verified ID. We'll just use the MFA as most people do. And of course, if that's things like Windows Hello for Business, really easy to use, doesn't get in my way much. Another case we're looking at providing for users is help desk verification. So when people call into the help desk, we need to know who they are, and validating that user if they can't log on to the system, if that's the issue they're having, and prove their right to who they are with that, then we can use these verified IDs to actually prove that I am who I am when I come to the help desk, and they can actually give me the support that they need. Just kind of streamline the process. We've done all kinds of things for people in the past involving birth dates and social security numbers and all that. Then you run into these issues of who has access to that data. This way is much cleaner because, again, it gives the ID and control of that to the user, and they only present it when they actually want to. And then a loyalty program, right? If I work for a particular company and they have an association with Costco, for example, that I get a deal on something, I can prove that I am an employee with this verified ID to that discount organization or whatever benefit I might be gaining because I'm an employee of the organization. So again, just digital methods to allow us to determine that a user is who they say they are for whatever reason we might want to. The process flow here is really pretty simple for Entra Verified IDs. And of course, this is an open standard. It's going to be done a lot of different ways by different people in the world. But this is the way that Microsoft is rolling this out currently. We'll see some variations in way things happen and the way that these can be managed. But this is the basic concept of this, is that you have an issuer. We talked about the issuer, the verified ID issuer running in an app service up in, mine's running in a web service, an app service up in Azure. And I contact that service to request a verified ID. And my request for that will require that something be accomplished to prove that I am who I say I am. I might have to just authenticate. If it's for an employee identification, maybe I just do my employee auth. It knows who I am, right? It can call the graph and say, pull his name, photo, email, title, all those things, stuff them in the verified ID, and we're off and running. It might be presenting an existing verified credential, right? I might have, and we'll see this in the second part of my demo, I might be asking for a verified credential that proves that I have the right to this particular resource. And simply by authenticating may not be enough. I may have to have a particular clearance. I might have to have some previous training that allows me to work with this, something else along those ways, or any other ID. It could be a one-time password, because this is an onboarding scenario. Might have communicated a one-time password over over voice, telephone, or something like that, and they can use that one-time password to get in. Or might be your phone number that's associated with a loyalty. program or something along those lines, right? But you're going to complete whatever it is to indicate to the verifier that you should get this credential. And they may look up something in the back end to match or whatever. Then as a result of that, the user will receive the verified ID, and the user will store that ID in a wallet. Now, this wallet may be a standalone wallet. It might be something that a third party has created. In our case, in my case at least right now, I'm using the Microsoft Authenticator as my verified credential wallet. Applications could store this in their own wallet. So I could have a mobile application that I want to, I mean, potentially this could work much like an OAuth token, that I require somebody to go get the verified ID, store that in my mobile app, and then simply verify that ID every time the mobile app starts up. And if that ID gets revoked, then I no longer get access to that mobile app, and the company at that point has control over whether I continue to operate. Whereas in OAuth, I always have the choice of whether I kill an OAuth connection. So just a slight twist on that. But in most cases, we're going to see these stored in wallets, and then the user will present them in one form or another to verify that ID. So after I get it, then how do I use that? Well, I might complete my shopping cart. I might fill my shopping cart. I've got a loyalty card. I want to apply those discounts. Then I present my verified ID, and they give me the discount as long as my loyalty program is still correct, or that maybe I had maybe I'm completing an application for a job, same thing, or just requesting access to a resource. So then I would present the verified ID. The application would prompt me to present it. In a lot of cases, we'll see this as actually using a QR code. I then scan that code, which then provides the verified ID to the verifier, who is the user who wants to prove that I have that right, and they will then verify that ID. They'll validate that with the issuer. The issuer will return, hopefully success, that we validated that, and then we'll move forward with the process, whatever that process might be. So let's take a look at the demo here. Demo does say free beer, but as it says in the note, they're not applicable on the webinar. This is a little thing I put together to show at AFCEA. There's a government conference, and this is using Microsoft's samples. If you're interested in this, you can go out and find these samples, build them, put them into a web application. You can run them locally just for fun, things like this. I modified this to take username or first name, last name, and email address to collect that information, and then I can use the verifier to verify that that user does have the credential. And it's really just to go through the exercise, right? There's no magic here, but it shows the process of this. And I've used this at conferences, or if you go out, you do the registration, find me, get verified, then I'll buy you a beer, right? It seems like an easy thing to do. I have one here. We'll take a look. Let's just go through the process here. The user enters username, their email address, and clicks get credential. Here I just pop it up so that people can see what they're actually doing. Let me go find my phone and get prepared for that. Oh, there we go. So I'll click get credential. In this case, it tells me to scan with Microsoft Authenticator. I click the scan on here's my Authenticator app over here. I select the scan, and this will take a moment to line up here. There we go. It scanned the QR code. You see it's giving me a PIN, which means that no one else can take that verified ID. It's mapped back to this, giving me a PIN to help protect this. I go ahead and select that PIN, enter the PIN, and now I've selected my verified ID. So I add that into my collection, and you see that now I have a new free beer AFCEA Honolulu. I have to update this for the next AFCEA conference. So that was issued. Now when I want to come and do the verifier, I took the links out because I didn't want it to be too easy for people to find. The verifier looks very similar. So this would be the user finds me, says, Mark, I've got this verified ID, you need to buy me a beer. I said, prove it. Click on the verified ID. Again, scan the QR code. It asks which, because I have more than one, it's going to ask me. So it knows which one. If you've ever used credential authentication, you know that sometimes the thing will pop up asking you for the credential and you have no, or the certificate, you have no idea which certificate they want. In this case, it does say which verified ID. This one was called verified, misspelled it, credential expert verifier. So I know that that goes to these. I have an old one, this is expired, but here's my current one. So I'll share that. It goes up, validates that, and presents this information. This is just kind of some debug information I put in here to show all of the information that's contained within this verified ID. So it says, yep, we know who he is. The verified ID is valid, right? Here's my DID, right? It was issued by ocgdev.com, which is our sandbox instance. That's the issuer. The type, it's a free beer. The claims, first name, last name, mail address, and the credential state shows as valid. So all those things are in there. If instead I try and present an invalid credential, this will do the same thing, right? We'll go back, we'll grab a credential. And in this case, I'll choose the invalid one. I'll share that. And you see I get an error. This is, how do we want to put this? This is a work in progress. Microsoft is going to do something better than this. This should actually come up and tell me that it has not validated. But this is not, there's nothing broken here. This is the way the process works right now. So those things will get better. The other example I want to show is an example that Microsoft has, and this is up in the, let's see if we go back here. Yeah, in the Microsoft's credential, introduction to verified ID. If you go down here, there's an end-to-end demo. And what this one shows is the ability to chain together verified credentials to produce an outcome. So I have this true identity. We can see here that it's expired, right? And that verifies who I am. And then Woodgrove verifies that I am an employee, but that one's also expired because I did this months ago. So let's just go ahead and get rid of those, right? We'll delete that one. And true identity, we'll delete that one. And so we'll go ahead and do a new registration, right? So I'm going to verify with true identity. This goes out to true identity. I enter my information. I upload government issued ID. This is all faked up. It isn't really my ID. And it verifies, and of course it will verify me every time, right? So now I get the QR code. I scan that QR code again with my phone. I get a PIN, very similar to the scenario we just saw. Right, 4929 done. Next, add. All right. So now I've got my true identity, but now I need to go get my my Woodgrove, my Woodgrove employee ID. I'll scan that in. I'm going to share my true identity, right? It knows that that is me. I retrieve my workplace ID. And 9966. I add that. And now I'm all set. Now I want to use that Woodgrove to get a discount on my purchase I can use my employee credential. Again, we scan. The phone is my friend here. And I share my verified employee. And now my prices have dropped. So that's a nice, a pre-built Microsoft provided demo that if you want to show people the kinds of things that this can do, I think it's a really good example. We'll get back to my slide presentation here. So who is this really focused on? We can see that it's an identity component. It falls under Entra, which is Microsoft's identity play, right? So who is really going to be interested by this? And it's not as much IT, we don't think, as you might, as we're used to, right? When we talk identity, it's always IT, security, IAM, all those people. But this thing kind of bleeds over much more into human resources, which is not a group that we're used to working with, but that everybody has to support and is an important component, right? And this allows us to do proofing for onboarding for them, which is really interesting. Proofing for any benefits, perhaps, through human resources. Security certainly has an interest in this, using proofing for access, right? Some of the things that we need to think about, though, before we do this are, what are the privacy implications, right? We're going to be handing out things like users' email address, potentially a phone number, their name. Some of that's PII, some of it isn't, right? How does the company feel about it being involved in this? So these are all things much bigger than just the technical aspects of it, which we're really quite familiar with working with. So it is early days in Verified ID. So it's a good time to get started in it, start looking for what opportunities are out there. As we said, it requires a trust between organizations. So if I'm going to trust a university or a group of universities for their verified IDs for any programs or degrees that applicants have completed, then I'm going to need to have that trust with them, so that as a verifier, I can go out and ask the issuer and make sure that that is a true and valid and current case, and that works for me. We talked about a few of the use cases, but there's lots more out there. And as I said, early days, you want to prepare your organization, talk to people in these places that you think will use these verified IDs, configure the verified ID in the Azure tenant. You don't need to go through and build out that website and all of those things to understand it and be able to explain it to people. You can go into Azure, look for verified ID, the ability to build those credentials that you saw, the verified IDs that you saw in my wallet. It's really pretty simple. You pick a color, you get your logo, and whatever other information wants to go in there. As I said, Microsoft's expanding with student and faculty pre-built IDs that'll have other attributes in them. You can index attributes in here, so you can search the system for them. There's a lot of things that you can do in here. If you really want to go farther, dig into those sample apps to distribute the verified credentials, and then also verify them as you saw in there. Now, I talked about a very focused use case for verified credentials, which is a user holding their credential, presenting it for access to one thing or another. There are multiple ways that this can be used, and I'm still learning all of those as well. We have a partner, a new partner for OCG. Don't know that they're our newest partner, but they are a new partner. We met them last year at an event, and they are a Canadian company, although worldwide presence. I know they've got people here in the US as well, and in Europe. Very forward-leaning on verified credentials. They have a lot of knowledge about it. They're doing work around helping to validate across those blockchains. One of the issues with verified credentials is that you can use blockchains, but organizations are using different blockchains. And so if I use one blockchain and you use another, we may not be able to verify each other's credentials. Credivera is working to bridge that, and also doing some really interesting use cases on what I would call kind of compound verified IDs, which is in industrial security settings. Have people been trained? Do they have the qualifications? Have they been through the class in the past year, right? For these things that have to, continuing education that has to happen. Even over the road truckers having proper qualifications and all of those things. And a lot of their cases, which are interesting and kind of different than what we just talked about today, are that they work with organizations to gather all of these credentials together, and then those organizations can make sure that someone who's on site at their job site has all of the training that is required for them, without the user having to whip out their phone and hand over 6 credentials every time it happens. And so this is a slightly different view on it, but it's some really interesting stuff, really smart people. And we're going to do a webinar with them in February on the 22nd to see how they're approaching Entra and verified credentials. So I think this is a really interesting space. There's certainly a lot more to come. As I said, very early days on this, but giving power to the user to manage their credentials and decide what is presented to someone else instead of having to have this centralized credential that then they need to come and trust my IDP every time we try and do something. I think this is just really interesting identity work. So thanks for attending, not our longest webinar, but if we've got questions, looks like there's one here. Wouldn't it be interesting to onboard customers using their Blockbuster ID card? Yeah, well, they're probably not too secure, but it would be fun. I always enjoy a good laugh, so I'll take that. Any other questions or anything else? The follow-up webinar with Credivera, Jackie's going to send a follow-up email if you were registered for this, so you'll get that, and there'll be a link in there for that. But thanks for attending. I hope it was informative, and feel free to reach out if there's anything I can help you with. Thanks for your time.